I know this is sudden, but can you stay at my place for a month starting next month? This utterly unexpected request came from the newly transferred female chief who had suddenly called me in. It was more than enough to throw me into a state of confusion. We were not close enough for me to be kiving at her place. "Excuse me," I stammered, taken aback. The chief blushed, fidgeting in embarrassment. Through this request from the chief, my life was about to take a significant turn. "My name is Thomas Mason. I'm 32 years old and work at an elderly care facility. I've always loved interacting with older folks since I was a kid, being quite the granny's boy, so kiving is the perfect job for me. However, the kiving staff at work are mostly women in their 50s and 60s. There are only 2 men, me and the chief. That's why the chief, and I often take on heavy lifting, and I was a little dissatisfied with the unfair division of work. But I can't voice such complaints to the female staff. The chief, who was the only one I could rely on, has already passed the age of 65 and will retire soon. Once the chief retires, will I help everyone with their work? Until now, the work was finished because the chief helped me with it. Such thoughts filled my mind, and I couldn't help but sigh. Then the chief retired in no time, and a 35-year-old female chief was assigned from another department. "My name is Kay Scott. Nice to meet you all." When she introduced herself to us, I felt that Miss Scott suddenly looked surprised when her eyes met mine and quickly averted her gaze. Then she continued with her greeting. "What's going on? Does she know me? But I don't know her." I started working with a little strange feeling. Unlike the previous chief, the new chief did not seem intimidated by the older staff in their 50s and 60s, and was not shy about giving work instructions. "Helen, one of the residents is calling you. Please attend to them. Jessica, you left meal assistance halfway to guide someone else to their room, didn't you? Please finish one task before moving on to the next." The new chief was brisk in her directives and closely observed the movements of the kiving staff, giving necessary corrections. There was no wasted motion in her work. Her directions and reminders were always on point. However, the queen bee staff, who had been there for many years, didn't like being instructed by a younger chief. "She's acting high and mighty for being so young. She's getting carried away just because she's the chief." Complaints about the chief had become commonplace at work. For some reason, the chief didn't give me any work instructions. It was as if she thought, "You can handle things on your own, right?" even without her saying it. Seeing this, the queen bee staff members started complaining about the chief again. "It's weird how she only gives us instructions and doesn't say anything to Thomas. She's probably just buttering him up because he's a man. Pathetic for a chief." Whenever I was in the staff room, I could always hear people badmouthing the chief. I was getting wary of hearing it, so I started spending more time chatting with the residents and less time in the staff room. However, being out of the staff room meant my paperwork wasn't progressing at all. I was getting tired of feeling like I didn't have a place at work, and my work was not moving forward. That's why I asked her for instructions. What should I do? Is there any work that I can handle? After saying that, I approached the chief on my own. Then finally, the chief said to me, "All right, then do this," and started to assign tasks to me. But the tasks given to me were things like changing sheets and cleaning the floors. It was obvious that these tasks were not kiving duties, just odd jobs. Seeing me accepting these tasks from the chief, the queen bee staff members started badmouthing the chief again behind her back. "That chief, she's definitely pandering to men, changing the work she assigns based on gender and age. She's really a wicked woman. The behind-the-back talk from the Queen Bee staff members was only increasing day by day. I started racking my brain about how I could improve the relationships at work. During such a time, I was called by the chief to the conference room. Did I do something? I couldn't think of anything. Well, it doesn't matter. Since I was called by the chief, I might as well discuss the interpersonal issues as well. As I was walking towards the conference room with various thoughts, I noticed the chief fidgeting with an unusually embarrassed look. When I asked, is there something you need from me?" she just kept looking down without saying a word. While I was watching the chief with curiosity, she finally opened her mouth. "I'm sorry for this sudden request, but can you stay at my place for a month next month?" "What?" I was confused by the sudden, unexpected request from the chief. "I'm going on overseas training, so could you look after my cat for me?" Saying so, the chief handed me her house keys, fidgeting with a bashful look. Ah, so that's what this is about. Although I understood, I felt a strange sense of urgency about this unexpected request from the chief. Why me? Aren't there other people you could ask? When I asked the chief that, she looked at me with a blush and said, "There's no one else I can ask. That's why I'm asking you, Thomas," and gazed intently at me. Looking at the chief's embarrassed yet serious eyes, I couldn't refuse. "Well, if you're okay with me, I'll do it." As I muttered that, the chief's face lit up all at once. "Really? Well, I'm counting on you next month, then," she said. Now back to work, and walked out of the meeting room with a spring in her step. I could only stand there dumbfounded, watching the cheerful figure of the chief retreat. No matter if she didn't have anyone else to ask, why me? I'm not particularly close to the chief. With those thoughts in mind, I returned to my workspace. It was strange that the chief would entrust all her personal and home matters to me, a mere employee. As I thought about various things, I felt strange about the chief's attitude and had a vague feeling. At the end of the workday, I decided I had to refuse the chief's request and stay behind in the office. However, the chief was caught up in preparing for her overseas training. She was discussing the training with the office staff, receiving explanations about the flow of the day, meeting up with the translator, and so on. In our nursing home, there is an annual overseas training program for caregivers, nurses, and dietitians. They visit countries known for their advanced welfare systems like Sweden, Denmark, and New Zealand to observe and learn about their caving techniques in local hospitals and elderly homes. Usually, experienced employees attend to reflect on their usual caving tasks, but it seems that they couldn't gather participants this year. Apparently, the caregiver who was supposed to go suddenly couldn't make it due to a family matter. It was understandable then that the chief, who had recently transferred, was suddenly set to go on overseas training next month. As the chief busied herself with preparations for the overseas training, a month passed without me being able to say a word. The spare key she had given me still remained in my bag. The day before the chief's overseas training, I wondered, is she really going tomorrow? As I stared at the key I had received from the chief and thought about various things, the chief, who was about to go on her overseas training the next day, called out to me, "Could you drop by my place after work today? From tomorrow, I'll be relying on you to take care of my home daily." Upon hearing the chief's voice, I ended up having dinner at the chief's house after work that day. For some reason, although I should be visiting the chief's house for the first time, the apartment building seemed vaguely familiar. I thought about it for a while, but, in the end, I couldn't remember anything. With a feeling of unease, I entered the chief's home. As soon as I stepped into the chief's home, something black flew across in front of me. What? As I stood there in surprise, the cat, which had been on top of the cat tower until a moment ago, dashed into the depths of the room with great speed. She's incredibly shy around people. She's never let any visitors touch her, the chief explained while putting down her bag, donning an apron, and starting to prepare dinner. Wait a minute. I've never owned a cat before. There's no way I can take care of one that's so timid. When I voiced my concerns, the chief waved me over to the kitchen and said, "Come over here." She then proceeded to teach me about the proportions and timing for preparing cat food and water. She even showed me how to clean the litter box. But even if I understand how to take care of her, I don't think I'll be able to bond with her, I sighed. The chief responded, "You don't have to force yourself to get along with her. Just make sure you feed her and take care of the litter box. That's all you need to do." I was overwhelmed by the chief and reluctantly said, "I understand." I learned only the basics of cat care from her. Then the chief hastily cooked dinner for me and left early the next morning for her overseas training program. The next day, I continued with my regular work as usual. Today as well, I was busy with work, and before I knew it, it was past the regular time. "Oh no, I have to take care of the cat," I exclaimed and quickly stood up, hastily clocked out, and headed towards the chief's house. When I arrived at the house, a swift black figure dashed past me. Looking up, I saw a cat tower next to the front door, and from it, the cat jumped down and fled into the room. Is it okay to jump down from such a high place? If this continues, she'll eventually get hurt. Saying so, I went into the room to replenish the cat's food and clean the litter box. As I did this, the cat watched me intently through a gap in the sliding door of the bedroom. Come to think of it, I hadn't asked the chief for the cat's name. I took the liberty of naming her Fluffy and tried to beckon her over, but the cat hissed in intimidation. I worried that this situation might be causing the kitty some stress. I said to her, "I'm going home now. Make sure you eat your food," and left the chief's house. For about a week, I went over to the chief's house daily. The cat seemed to find it strange that I, a stranger and not its owner, was visiting the house every day to feed it and clean its litter box. Slowly, she started venturing out from behind the sliding door of the bedroom, tentatively sniffing my back. However, she would jolt and retreat back to the bedroom whenever I moved. Despite this, I felt like I was gradually closing the distance with the cat. In order not to startle her, I'd carefully place a treat in front of her, keeping my movements to a minimum. Even though she'd contemplate returning to the bedroom for a moment, she'd sniff at the treat and take a bite. With such persistent efforts, the cat started to come near me. She would sniff the hem of my clothes, back hunched in caution. She would surely bolt at an incredible speed if I made any sudden move. I was unable to move, frozen in place for several minutes. I started work early at 7:00 a.m. and worked overtime. I ended up missing my lunch break and was famished. I desperately wanted to eat something, but I couldn't move. My hunger eventually won over, and I decided to move slowly. The chief had previously told me, "You can eat anything you find in the house." I got up as if in slow motion and went to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator and scanned its contents just with my eyes. For some reason, the cat did not run away but slowly followed me, then just sat there watching me. I couldn't figure out what to eat, so I pulled out a fruit jelly that the chief had bought and placed it on the table. The cat, from under the table, looked up at me curiously as I sat there eating the fruit jelly for dinner. With all of this going on, I naturally became closer to the cat, and before I knew it, she didn't run away even when I touched her. In fact, she began to rub against me and purr. I had no idea why I was so favored, and of course, I couldn't ask the cat. I was filled with a sense of wonder as I had never touched a cat before. I was fascinated by how soft and comforting the cat was. Without realizing it, playing with the chief's cat had become my only source of comfort after a hard day's work. Today marks the final day of the chief's overseas business trip. As always, I looked forward to playing with the cat and headed over to her house. Unusually, the cat was waiting for me at the entrance. "Ah, a welcome party. Thank you," I said to the cat, giving it a scratch. As I was doing so, I felt something odd on my hand. "What's this? Was this here before?" I thought to myself. Feeling the cat's belly once again, there it was. A lump, small like a marble. I don't know anything about cats, but the thought of the cat being sick filled me with anxiety. In a panic, I looked for a 24/7 veterinary clinic in a rush. To my surprise, the vet's eyes widened in shock. "This seems to be a skin tumour. At this size, it would be very difficult to find unless you're frequently touching and checking the cat's body." "Good find," he said with a reassuring smile. He continued, "Given the small size, we can likely remove it completely with immediate surgery. We'll have to look at the pathology report for certainty, but we should schedule the surgery as soon as possible." Despite being a popular clinic with a 1-month waiting list for surgeries, it turned out there had been a recent cancellation, so I could book the surgery. I scheduled the surgery right there, and, given my worry about the cat, I decided to stay at the chief's house for the night. This house felt familiar somehow, but it wasn't a place I knew. With that thought nagging at me, I laid down on the caving room couch, petting the cat until before I knew it, I fell asleep. The following day, the chief returned from her overseas training. Was everything okay? Did anything happen? The chief rushed over to me with a worried look. "I'm fine," I stammered, then told her about the cat's illness. "What? You noticed that?" The chief was surprised. The cat, who usually didn't let anyone else touch it, had allowed me to pet it daily. After her overseas training, the chief returned to a whirlwind of preparing for a presentation at a meeting and arranging for the cat's surgery. The surgery, which I was worried about, was a success. The results of the pathological examination revealed that it was a malignant tumour. However, because it was discovered early, the cancer was completely removed, and the possibility of metastasis was considered very low. When she finally had a moment of calm, she wanted to thank me again and invited me to her house. As soon as I arrived, the cat, with its eyes shining, approached me with its tail up. Watching me and the cat, who kept rubbing up against me fervently, the chief started to speak. "You've always been such a perfect gentleman, even back then. I can see why my sister and the cat chose you." I widened my eyes and asked, "What do you mean?" But as I looked at her face, I remembered something. I was always a bit more mature than my classmates in elementary school, partly due to my physical build. I know it might sound weird to say this, but I was a bit of a heartthrob and was quietly popular among the girls. In the 6th grade, I became an official couple with my first love, and our relationship lasted until middle school. Looking at us, her sister would watch us with an envious look, like, "You guys are lucky." "Could it be you're the sister of my first love?" When I said that to the chief, she laughed with a bright smile and said, "Did you just notice?" Then she told me a story. After my first love, and I broke up in middle school, our parents divorced. Her sister went to live with their mother, and the chief went with their father. Their father passed away from cancer a few years ago. She hasn't been able to get in touch with her sister or her mother. Feeling left behind and lonely, Kay started keeping a cat a few years ago. This house is actually her childhood home. But it's changed a lot recently as the area has been developed into a new residential area. The apartment was also renovated, which is why I didn't recognize it. To distract herself from her loneliness, she had been putting on a brave face at work. Then she was transferred to my department, and we were reunited. I secretly had a crush on you as I watched how seriously you cared about my sister, she said, smiling shyly. Unlike when she was at work, she had a really kind and cute atmosphere. I felt an electric shock course through me, blindsided by this unexpected revelation of our past connection. From that moment, I found myself frequently visiting her house to see the cat. You've done so much for the cat. It's gotten much better thanks to you. I can't thank you enough. She'd repeatedly expressed her gratitude. To which I replied that I wanted something in return. When she asked what I wanted, without missing a beat, I pointed towards the entrance hall and said, "I'll take that." She looked confused until I held up the spare keys to her house. This is what I meant. Understanding dawned on her, and her cheeks flushed a sweet pink. She was so cute that I hugged her. From that day on, our relationship officially started. "Just keep it quiet at work, okay?" she asked shyly. I noticed a softening in her personality since we started dating. Hasn't the chief been particularly nice to us lately? Maybe something good happened to her. Has she got a boyfriend now? As I watched her laugh off the remarks from the Queen Bee staff, I felt a sense of relief and couldn't help but smirk. I hope you enjoyed the story. Subscribing to the channel can be a great motivation for us. See you in the next video.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using therein. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.